All right. Okay.
We have a test for it. We can turn it off in any second.
This is on.
Yes.
Okay. So you did the thing with the cell phone, so that's good, okay? And if you get a phone call, please go out the back door there and before you answer your telephone. What I am declaring, and I'll explain why I'm doing this, it is, what time is it, Nick?
134.
It is 1:35, and hereby calling the November 2nd Conservation Commission to order. And the reason I'm declaring this as a public meeting is the Conservation Commission is sponsoring it, and we also buying and paying for all the food. But this is not an official meeting. We can't sponsor and we can't provide the food. We are doing it on an educational basis because the commission has gotten involved in what are the programs that are related to the environment that affect some of the work that we do that are important. And I've become very much aware of the Dark Skies movement, really how important it is. And remembering as a kid when I used to go up on sand hills and sleep overnight, and there was no light pollution, and the view was 360 degrees. And I remember living in Westboro and Southboro, before we moved out here. We didn't see stars. And one night we're at Straw Pond and with some friends, and we're sitting in chairs looking up at the sky. I was like, oh my God, I haven't seen this in just so long. So the dark skies are important, for the light, but it's all the health reasons, it's the environmental issues. And even though it's not the Conservation Commission, we consider a pollution item and affecting. So during the meeting, I'll be turning this meeting over, and who's ever leading the meeting, just please follow their cues. And this is an educational meeting. It's not a political debate, but it's here about the science, and it's an opportunity to learn. What's going to happen at about 20 after, maybe 25 after 4, we're going to close the meeting down, and we're going to ask for your help in moving tables and chairs around. And my help is going to serve you. Sarah, can you come up? This doesn't get done alone, but you're cooking a meal for 60 people if you don't do it by yourself. Sarah is a really accomplished cook, and it's just so great to have her here because she knows how to cook a plant-based diet with all the food, sourced locally, and there's no animal products in it. It's all non-GMO, organic. Do you have anything else? Oh, no gluten. So if somebody's got a gluten problem.
Maple syrup sweetened.
It's maple syrup. Oh, you gotta sweeten the food. Yeah, that's true. So, and but I'm grateful for her. And I have one other helper. You'll see her around the food later. During the day, before we eat tonight, there's plenty of stuff back there for you to grab. If you have dirty dishes, just bring them in the kitchen. There's a table there. Put all your dirty dishes right there, Doug. You got a dirt. Oh, Doug's got a dirty dish. Yeah, whatever it is. So you can bring them there. If you have any questions about the food or any concerns, just please come see us. There'll be a break in the middle of the afternoon. And I don't think I left anything out. And at this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over. What am I turning over to? Okay, so okay. All yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much, Sarah, and the rest of your incredible team. And by the way, just for your calendars, the 2025 International Dark Sky Association Massachusetts Chapter annual meeting will be on November 7th. Just saying. So, we're so happy to have everybody here. I just want to, oh, there we go. Got my agenda. All right. Hi, I'm James Lowenthal. I'm the president of the Massachusetts chapter of Dark Sky, and it's such a pleasure to welcome you here. It's such a pleasure to be so warmly hosted by a conservation commission, which is an unusual thing. And if the weather holds, we'll have some fun at the end of the day after we adjourn from here. It's not looking good at the moment. The first thing I want to say, though, is we're brought here by our common interests, and Dave just mentioned them, and there may be many different reasons that have brought you here, but there's a common node that is really important to all of us, protecting darkness at night for whatever reason we think it's such an important thing. Just a couple more thanks. I really want to thank Freeman, where are you, Lori, for the amazing job of the conduit, the connector between our organization and everything that's happening here in Bethel. I also want to thank everybody who worked so hard to make this meeting possible, in addition to the warm welcome everybody sees from Dave Johnson and the locals, and the incredible food that we're going to get to enjoy. I especially want to thank Anne Hayek for all of her work behind the scenes and the coordination. So thank you, Anne. A word about dark skies and light pollution for those who aren't already part of the dark sky movement. Light pollution is one of the most serious but least appreciated threats to human health and the environment. And it's one of the easiest to fix. It's unlike plastic in the oceans or greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Light pollution is fixed by turning the lights off. It's a flick of a switch. Natural darkness at night is critically important for species biodiversity. And this has been recognized at all levels up to the United Nations. And yet light pollution is so bad that more than 80% of the population of the United States cannot see the Milky Way from where they live. And it's so little known that you are now among the 1% of the population who even knows what light pollution is. We are part of a rapidly growing worldwide movement that is the dark sky movement. Around the globe, tens of thousands of activists and advocates like us are working with local, national elected officials, international even, lighting industry professionals, environmental public health organizations, and regular citizens to turn back the tide of that light pollution and bring back natural darkness at night. There are dark sky celebrations, dark sky festivals, dark sky exhibits, such as the one in Washington, D.C. at the National Museum of Natural History. We've been getting lots of media coverage, and we're getting more and more savvy about messaging and partnering with other larger, more experienced advocacy orgs, such as National Audubon. Dark Sky Mass is one of more than 70 chapters of DarkSky International, the worldwide leader of the movement, founded in 1988 and based in Tucson. DarkSky Mass was founded in the late 90s. We meet once a month by Zoom and once a year in person. The current officers, in addition to myself, are Anne Hayek, Vice President, Nancy Morrison, Secretary, who I hope is online, Kelly Beatty, Communications Officer, and Michael Person, Treasurer. Thanks so much to all of you for that good work. But we are a group of over 100 members statewide, and we meet regularly, a group of something like a dozen or 15 on a Zoom call once a month, and we invite you to join that. Most of the last several years, our main priority in Massachusetts has been getting statewide legislation passed to protect darkness at night. Now that we're all done with that, we're not done with it. Sorry, it failed. Right. It failed again.
It didn't fail, the legislature failed.
The legislature failed. Thank you, Kelly. This is an effort that's been underway for a good 25 plus years. Mario, correct me if I'm wrong about the exact dates, but it's been a very long struggle, and we're not done with it yet. We're now in a strategic planning process in DarkSky Mass, weighing the pros and cons of putting so much effort into such an uphill battle. And there are lots of other ways for us that we know about already to be effective as dark sky advocates besides legislation. And we're seriously considering a course change in the coming year and beyond. This year's meeting is unusual. At past meetings, usually it's been 30 of us or so at a location that's moved around the state. This is the first time we've ever been this far west. That's one way it's unusual. We've been as far west as Whately in the Connecticut River Valley, but it always moves around. But it's always been just us folks from DarkSky Mass. So please raise your hand if you've already are involved in even a slight way with DarkSky Massachusetts already. Okay, but it looks like about half the hands. So this is an unusual meeting in the sense that it's combined with the Conservation Commission in a municipal building. And there are some special things about this. We have all these Conservation Commission folks here too, and not just from Beckett. So please raise your hand if you, first of all, if you live in Beckett. Bunch of you, wow, this is amazing. And I think there's a lot more, I think that says a lot about how incredibly effective your organizing is here in Beckett, but that's happening. Please raise your hand if you live outside of Beckett, and have never had anything to do with DarkSky Mass before. Welcome to folks from outside of Beckett as well, and hope that it's useful for you, and we look forward to hearing what brought you here today as well. So as I said, light pollution is critically important, a critically important environmental issue, and we're thrilled to be able to share our message and our passion for protecting the night sky with the region's leaders of environmental protection. That's obviously what is at the heart of conservation commissions. So the structure of the meeting today, I'll introduce our first keynote speaker in a moment. Then we'll have 3 short 20-minute workshops. We'll ask you to divide yourselves up into 3 groups. We'll tell you how to do it. One group will stay in this room. The other 2 groups will go upstairs to 2 other rooms. You'll stay there for the hour, and we'll have 3 facilitators rotate through those groups so that it's only 3 people moving instead of 65 or however many we have here. Is 165? Our crowds are the biggest ever. So we'll have those workshops. Then we'll have our second keynote speaker. And then we'll have a very short business meeting, just 5 minutes. And then we'll have Q&A and open discussion for the remainder. And we'll adjourn at 4:30, as Dave just said, and we'll be treated to this amazing home-cooked vegan dinner, graciously prepared by Dave Johnson and his friends and family. If the weather holds, we'll do stargazing at Beckett Town Beach on the shore of Center Pond, less than 2 miles from here. It's not looking good at the moment. Okay, now it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce our first speaker, Dr. John Barentine. John is an international leader in the fight to save the night sky. With a PhD in astronomy, John understands the critical need for dark skies above astronomical observatories to be able to address the biggest questions about the cosmos and our place in it. But he also knows the importance of protecting natural darkness at night for all people, and indeed all life on Earth. A longtime staff member of DarkSky International, he now runs his own business, DarkSky Consulting. He has authored numerous peer-reviewed papers on light pollution, as well as the state of the science reports that he'll share today. He's widely quoted in national and international media. He's helped organize major international conferences on light pollution, and he leads or is a member of numerous professional committees and commissions devoted to protecting the sky at the national and international levels. We're very lucky to have John joining us today by Zoom from Tucson to give us an overview of the state of the science of light pollution. Welcome, John.
Thank you, James. Thank you to the organizers for having me today. Can everybody hear me okay? That's the first question.
Yes.
Yes? Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So let me go ahead and get my slides started. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. I wish I could be there with you. In addition to the things that James read off, I'm actively involved with our local chapter here in Southern Arizona. So we're in solidarity with everything you're doing in Massachusetts. And in the next about 20 minutes or so, I'm going to give you an overview of the State of the Science report, which is published by DarkSky International and updated annually. And I think is one of the best ways that we have of seeing the big picture about light pollution. And as James mentioned, teeing this up, when he described it as the most important or serious form of environmental pollution that nobody really knows about, part of the goal of this effort is to increase that level of awareness and the approachability, if you will, of the subject, so that more people can know about this and understand something about it, because we think awareness will eventually lead to action. So here's the structure of what I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to first tell you what the report really is. go into why we think it is needed. Then I'll tell you how we put it together. I'll show you how the report is structured and how to use it, most importantly. So for the benefit of your advocacy, for making other people aware of this issue and increasing that sense of public understanding of the issue. And finally, I'll go over a few of the research highlights from 2023 that are the subject of the current version of the report as we kind of look back over the previous year with each new edition. And then we'll have an opportunity for some question and answer. So first of all, what is this report? Well, it's based around something that, and I'm going to talk about this because I know that there are people in the room that don't know very much about it. So you're going to hear me use a term, ALAN, A-L-A-N, which is just short for artificial light at night. When we hear the term light pollution, I think what comes to mind for most people is light in the night sky that makes it difficult to see the stars. We often make analogies or references to astronomy or stargazing when we talk about light pollution. And people sometimes believe that what they experience in that situation where you have this diffuse glow of light in the night sky, that is itself light pollution. And I would say that it's a symptom of the problem rather than the problem itself. The problem is artificial light at night. And what we then term as sky glow is a symptom of it. The State of the Science report considers both of the kinds of artificial light at night that you see in these examples on the right. And what I'm intending to reference here is that there is an outdoor context for artificial light at night, which is the picture of the New York City skyline. And then there's a distinct indoor component that's represented by the person who's staring at a screen probably far too late into the night. And the reason that I draw that distinction is especially anytime we're talking about the effect of this phenomenon on human beings, we should remember that most of our light exposure is coming from these indoor spaces and less of it in a direct way is coming from the outdoors. It's still an important element as far as the total light exposure that people get. But I want to draw this distinction and to say that mostly this report focuses on that outdoor context. So just bear that in mind. So if you hear me say ALAN, what I mean is artificial light at night. So what the report is an overview of the best of our knowledge about the effect of ALAN in these 7 broad topical areas. These are mostly subjects that we have been talking about in the dark sky movement now for many years. Some of them are a little newer. I would say that the first 5 are the core of what has been our message for more than a decade now. But increasingly, we are looking at the social and even environmental justice aspects of light pollution. So this has a social dimension to it. And as of a few years ago, now we have to be concerned about light pollution of a certain kind that's coming from above the Earth in the form of the increasing number of satellites that are in orbit around our planet. And so we're now treating that as an additional topic among all of these others. So the idea is that the report would be a high-level overview of the science. It does not get especially detailed or down into the weeds on any of those topics. It's designed to convey an impression about those topical areas. It's a compendium of the scientific results, and it's backed extensively with citations so as to come across as a credible source of information. But in addition to simply summarizing what is out there in the science, we provide some context and some interpretation. So what we're looking for is not only what the results are, but what is the scientific consensus about what the science is telling us. And lastly, we mention a little bit at the end about what we think are the most important unsolved problems, the open questions right now in this field of research, and what the directions might be in the future, and give a sense of which of those we think are most important to informing this bigger picture. So why is this needed? It's something that has only existed for a few years. Well, it kind of goes back to the same sort of things that we've been talking about so far, the sense that a lot of people don't know about this topic. And even if they do become aware of it, there's a need to make sure that they have a good factual grounding in the subject. So the advocacy work that we do necessarily refers to scientific topics. And we actually benefit tremendously from the fact that there has been a lot of scientific research into the topic of artificial light at night and these related issues, and that we're not waiting for it to be done. So we already have a good, solid factual foundation to build on here. But we also want to come across as credible. We want to make strong and evidence-based arguments about light pollution, and we should be able to always show what our sources of that information are. That helps ensure that the argument we're making is well-grounded in fact, not to say that we cannot make emotional arguments, because we should, but at the end of the day, we must be able to tie our messages back to independently verifiable information to ensure that we come across as credible so that people hopefully will listen to the arguments that we are making. We also think that our advocacy should really be based on not only accurate information, but it needs to be timely. We need to stay abreast of developments in the science on these subjects so that when we make arguments that are based in evidence, we know that they represent the latest and greatest information, while at the same time making clear where the gaps are, acknowledging the shortcomings in our understanding, because those are for one thing, are good topics for future research. But we don't want to oversell the topic. We don't want to go beyond what the facts will support, too far at least. And a way to do that is to make sure that we have this good grounding. But we also need to make sure that this information is packaged in a way that is useful. So not only do we distill this down to the most important essence, but it's important that we phrase this in accessible language so that people can approach and understand the material that we're providing them, and they can then go out and hopefully explain it to other people. So how did we go about composing this report? Well, the origin of artificial light state of the science, it goes back just before the pandemic. It was about 2019 or thereabouts, when I was still working for IDA on their staff. And as a scientist on the staff, it became clear to me that we had good arguments and we had a good scientific basis for them, but we often didn't connect the two. And I thought it would be useful to have something that was relatively short, that we could easily put in front of people like elected officials in ways that they could grasp the information and make sure that they understood that there was a good factual basis for the arguments that we were making. And that's ultimately where this came from. And after producing the first version of it during the pandemic, we've been updating it on an annual basis to make sure that it stays current. And our main source for this is something that's called the Artificial Light at Night Database, or ALAN-DB. This is something that myself and a few other researchers started in about 2014. And so we're now in a decade into this. It's publicly accessible. You can reach it at that URL there on the screen, alandb.darksky.org. It's based on a platform called Zotero that is used to manage a lot of scholarly literature databases and similar kinds of databases of documents. We curate the content of it. We all work together, the group of us that maintains it, to scan the scientific literature for relevant papers. We evaluate them for their quality and then make a decision on which ones to put into the database to keep the quality of the content very high. And so when we go about composing the update to this report every year, this is our source. And I encourage you to take a look, especially if you're ever looking for a research paper or report that's especially useful to a topic that you're working on or interested in learning more about. This is your go-to source to find that information. If you look at the interface for the platform, and this is what you would see if you opened it up on your computer, a couple of things to point out is that every item that's in our database has a complete bibliographic record with it. We have put as much information into it as we can find. You can click on any of those entries and get that record. We assign a set of keywords to every single article that we put into the database. They all get one of at least, there's about 15 top level keywords. This makes searches so much more efficient. So you can say, show me all the papers on ecology, and then, narrow that down. Show me those published in the last 5 years or whatever your time horizon is. And you will get the results that represent only that group of papers. And then you can do full searches on the titles and, the journals that they appear in, contents of the abstract, et cetera. There's a search box up there in the corner to quickly get to the information that you're looking for. And this has turned out to be a tremendous value to us. This shows the number of papers in the database per year based on the year that they were published, going back a little over 20 years now. And you can see it just steadily rises, and it's been accelerating in recent years as the research interest in the subject of artificial light at night has gone up. And now we're adding on the order of 400 to 500 papers per year on all of these subjects. So it's growing very rapidly. We just exceeded 5,000 citations in the database just in the last few months. And I expect that's going to continue to grow and become this very rich source of information to inform the report. So this is a breakdown of the papers that we added to the database that were published in 2023, which is a little over 500 of them. And the pie chart shows how they break down by topic. And you can see there are some subjects that are a bit more popular among the researchers than others. Papers on wildlife and ecology are the greatest share of those, followed by papers on the subject of what we would call remote sensing. This is using mostly satellite data, but data from other platforms. I'll show you some examples of that in a few minutes to get the bird's eye view, as it were, of light pollution around the world. And then, of course, human health remains a very popular topic. This reflects a bit how easy or difficult it is to get the work funded. It's a lot more useful to funding agencies if you're doing work in health or in wildlife than some of these other subjects, but we're seeing growth in these other areas as well. And some of them are growing almost explosively. The number of papers about the subject of the satellite interference issue is probably the fastest growing among all of these topics. So our sources that go into informing the report, much like what we put into the Allen database, really prefer those that are independently peer reviewed. That is the gold standard in science, that they have been subject to independent third-party review by people who were not involved in the studies. And we look for sources that are in reputable scientific journals. We generally avoid sources that were not subjected to that kind of review, but not exclusively. Sometimes there are technical reports where we just don't have any other information about a particular topic. And so we might consider adding white papers, for example. We add student theses and dissertations often because those are usually subject to examining committees, which is a kind of a form of peer review. We think about the reputation of the publication outlets, and we look at their citation rates as well, since more highly cited papers tend to be the ones that have a greater impact on fields in science. And then again, making sure that we've got as much bibliographic information as possible for all of the sources so that people can go and find the original paper or report and read it for themselves. And then for the analysis piece, where I said that part of what we were trying to do is not only aggregate this material together, but provide some context and interpretation, we're looking for the common themes and the conclusions that people are drawing across multiple sources. So where one study might find a very interesting or suggestive result, there are cases where it will differ or disagree with something else that's out there in the literature. Whereas in other areas, we may find that a lot of sources are agreeing about one conclusion or another and pointing the way in the direction towards what is likely to be the right answer, knowing that science is a self-correcting endeavor of humanity. And then what we did with all of that is to write a narrative about these topical areas. And we tried to use plain language to the point that we've run the text through software that scores the language for readability to try to improve it. And I should note that when I say improve the readability, sometimes people will refer to dumbing down of information. I don't believe that's what we're doing at all. I think we underestimate the intelligence of the people who are likely to read reports like this. It's just a matter of really avoiding jargon that's unfamiliar to people, not simplifying the concepts to the point that they're meaningless anymore. So it's making the language more approachable in hopes that people will actually read this and will make use of the information that's in it. So how did we then structure this report? And what I'll show you here are some screenshots that represent what the pages of the report look like, and I'll point out some of the important features. So here, for example, this is the front page of the report. There is beneath the title, there is something called a digital object identifier, or DOI number, that makes this report citable. It is indexed so that you can refer to that number even many years from now. It will always follow this version of the report, and other people will always then be able to locate it. We have a 1-paragraph summary of the entire document. That's that paragraph in bold in the upper left that explains what each of the sections are. There's a short paragraph length introduction that is the highest level distillation of its content. So if you had no more than about 30 seconds to pitch your idea to somebody, you might essentially restate what's in that introduction. And then those 7 topical areas that I mentioned earlier each have a section unto their own in the report with a heading and a section number. And then beneath that, in a box, there is about 2 to 3 sentence summary of what's in that section. So you can see how this is going from the very highest level summary to now a summary for each of the topical areas, followed then by a complete set of information. And everything in those little green boxes, those are hyperlinks in the document, and they point to, you'll see in the end where our reference list is. And where we find there are useful illustrations, we've tried to add those throughout the document to increase the meaning of the text. They are generally under copyright, so we've had to obtain permission from journals to reproduce them, which generally isn't too much of a problem for us, fortunately. We do the in-text referencing. So again, those are these hyperlinks. Each of these numbers, there's a running list of references. Each one gets a unique number so that they're distinguishable in the end. And then in that final section, as I suggested earlier, we run through for each of these topics what occurs to us as the most important unsolved problems or the open questions that we hope are going to be the source of new research results in the future. We have a section towards the end that briefly describes the method that I told you about a minute ago, how we compiled the report, and shows some of the source material, including the Allen database. And then there is this large bibliography in the end that has complete citations for all of the references in the paper. And then there's a running title down in the bottom corner that again lists that digital object identifier and a page number to make it a little more user-friendly. So how would one go about using this report, since we intended this to be something that will support the advocacy efforts and increasing public awareness of the issues? Well, first of all, again, you've got that short introduction. Here it is, and it's a little more readable now because it's bigger. And it really gets into what Allen is, what light pollution is, why it's a problem, and what are the goals of our advocacy. This is, again, the highest level summary of what all of this is about. So this is something where the text could be repurposed for other things. Again, there are those headlines in each of the sections that if you string them together as a group, provide a little bit more detail on that introductory paragraph. You could take those boxes and you could put those on one sheet of paper. I've got a version of that to where if that's all your audience is going to read, that's the important information under each of those topical headings that they need to know. The statements that are in the paper can be adapted. You could use those little summaries in the boxes as talking points. You can take the text of the document and reuse it for whatever purpose you like. We have published it under a Creative Commons license. That means that The text does not have a copyright associated with it, and it can be reused with attribution. And you can use any of the contents of the report, again, except for some of the figures, because we don't have the ability to permit other people to reuse them. But we found that when people who want to use them have approached the authors or the journals about them, that they've been pretty good about giving permission for reuse. And one of the popular uses that we have found for the report is it takes the form of something that is referred to as a leave behind. So let's say you go have a meeting with your town council, with your state legislator, with your member of Congress or their staff, and you might only have a few minutes to speak to them about the idea of light pollution. At the end of that meeting, you can slide a paper copy of this report across the table and say, if you want to learn more about this subject, here's your point of entry. This has all of the relevant information in it that you could need, and it has the sources. And it can turn into something of a briefing that then, for example, a staffer for a legislator or a member of Congress could then go, read through that and then go brief the legislator on that topic. That's part of what we're trying to improve here with products like this. So in the last few minutes that I have here, what I'm going to do is step through what I think are some of the highlights from 2023 that bring you sort of up to date with the very cutting edge of what we know about this subject. I talked about remote sensing a few minutes ago, and I said it was the thing that gives us the bird's eye view of light pollution. And we're seeing this grow by leaps and bounds with people doing some very interesting things in order to give us a fuller picture of the extent of light pollution around the world. And for a number of years, going back as far as the 1970s, we've had access to civilians have had access to satellite imagery of the night side of the Earth that's provided us with the bulk of information about where the light at night is on our planet. But we are limited in many respects because the satellite data aren't really very high resolution. They have certain other limitations. So people are getting creative with ways to extract more information from satellite data and also to put cameras on other kinds of platforms that are a little bit closer to the Earth so that they can achieve better resolution on the ground. One of those is putting cameras on weather balloons, essentially, on balloons that will go up to around 60,000 feet and take many hours to drift across an area, during which time they can take a series of very high resolution photographs of the ground. Martin Aubé's group at the University of Sherbrooke in Canada are real leaders in this right now. And this is some examples of their system they call Oblong, the high altitude balloon light at night program that's making high resolution images of cities, mostly in Quebec and in Eastern Canada. And we're also starting to get more useful information from satellite data beyond just the intensity of the light. So what I'm showing you on the right is some of the first data from a satellite mission that gave us color information about the sources of light on the ground. And their example shown here is for the Las Vegas Strip. So if there's anywhere that's going to have a lot of light, of course, it's Vegas. And as I like to say, despite the advertising campaign, that not everything that happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And one of those things is its light. And what you're seeing on the right-hand panel there, the colors in that image are false colors, but they pertain to the color of the light that the satellite sensed, so that we can start to distinguish different varieties of lighting from orbit. And that is a much richer set of data than we would get if all we had was the total quantity of light reaching the spacecraft. So that's a real advance that just happened in the last couple of years. We've really, for the first time, started to understand how Alan is driving changes in global biodiversity, and how the people who work in the realm of ecology are really beginning to see this as a very important ecological stressor, in addition to effects like global climate change. And so this is some work by Evans et al. That was published last year that really sets forth this kind of hierarchy in flowchart format here, showing the extent to which Alan is really exerting a lot of pressure on the natural world through lots of different means, and how then there is interaction between these different elements of the ecology that results in changes to the structure of the entire web of life that we really didn't appreciate until just recently. And as we're getting bigger data sets, including from sources like citizen science projects, we're really beginning to develop an appreciation for this that we didn't have in the past. And I expect there will be more of that coming in the future. There's a lot of work being done on human health, again, with the caveat that much of this is done in more controlled laboratory settings where the majority of the light exposure is from indoor sources. But again, it's pointing in the same direction, and that is exposure to light at night from any source is generally detrimental to human health. A lot of it has to do with disruption of the circadian rhythm in our bodies, and that is increasingly acute as we age. And with an aging population, this is more important than ever. This work by DarkSky et al. Last year is really starting to pull together the threads of the connection between light exposure, disruption of the circadian rhythm, and the process that leads in the brain to dementia and perhaps the onset of diseases like Alzheimer's disease. And they're really beginning to show what the mechanism of that is. And as our population continues to age, we really need to think about this especially in places like care facilities, that we're not exposing people to undue amounts of light at night that may be either causing the onset of disease or accelerating it in people that are already suffering from it. And one of the surprising connections that we just had sort of tantalizing hints about, but is becoming a lot clearer, is how light pollution is interacting with air quality. We've known for some time that air pollution causes the night sky to be brighter because the very small particles suspended in the air are really good at scattering our light back down to the ground. But what we're increasingly seeing is how the light that's emitted from the ground and going up into the sky is changing the chemistry of the air over cities and may actually be making this problem worse. There are a few papers that were published last year, this is just one of them, that's showing how artificial light at night is interfering with a process that during the nighttime hours should be scrubbing certain chemical pollutants out of the air that form during the daytime due to exposure to the air from sunlight and interaction with human-caused chemicals in the environment. And normally a lot of that disappears out of the air at night, but we're interfering with it by putting light with just enough energy to sort of catalyze that process. Air pollution obviously has a connection to public health. And so to that extent that we're worried about this, as our population is increasingly urbanized, I think this is something where we're going to see more and more in coming years. And then lastly, I mentioned that one of the growth areas for research right now is the effect to which satellites orbiting the Earth and the space debris that they can produce is changing the night sky. And we still know surprisingly little about that. Even though we have had satellites in orbit around our planet for decades, it's only in the last few years that their numbers have just skyrocketed, to make a bad pun. There are now tens of thousands of satellites in orbit around our planet, and the risk of debris resulting from all of those satellites is increasing on a daily basis. But we're still learning about what that's doing to the night sky and to the atmosphere of our planet from those satellites coming back down when they reach their end of mission. So the bottom line here is expect that there will be more research into this area in the future, as it's a very hot topic right now. And very last, again, where is this going next? If I had to pick roughly half a dozen of what I think are the most important open questions right now, these are those questions. And the two in particular that I want to point out are those last two, which links up so much with our advocacy around outdoor lighting and this sense of reducing the waste that we know contributes to light pollution. How low can we safely go? How low can we lower the light intensities in our cities and towns to provide public safety while reducing the impact on the night sky? And what can we do to limit further the use of that light through adaptive controls, things like motion sensing switches, timers, other kinds of technology to reduce our light use? So it's my hope that this is what we'll be talking about in future State of the Science reports, are what we're learning about these ways that we can reduce light while making sure that we keep our cities safe at night. So with that, I will leave it there. You can download the report either on that URL up there in the yellow, or you can get your camera out really quick on your phone. That will take you directly to a page where you can download the report as a PDF. Happy to talk with you about this after this meeting. Plenty of ways to get a hold of me. I thank you for your attention, and we'll be glad to take your questions.
Thank you so much, John. We are so lucky, just privileged to have you giving this presentation today. Much obliged. And we have time for questions, including starting one from Dr. Mario Mota.
Just speak up.
Repeat the question.
Can you hear me?
Just repeat the question, James.
Yes, I can hear you, Mario.
Okay, great. So I've read through the report, and I just have one minor quibble. On section 3 on human health, you really downplay the effects of outdoor light pollution. Now you have both the American Medical Association and Massachusetts Medical Society have strong policy stating that is a problem. And I disagree. There's lots of strong evidence that it's a real issue. So I'm a little surprised. Yes, the indoor light is where you do most of the research. But we have strong evidence. The nurses study too had 130,000 nurses that were followed for 20 plus years. And they could document that if you lived in a city with light pollution, you had 15% higher risk of breast cancer than if you lived in a rural area. So I'm not sure why you're downplaying that.
That's a fair question. And the short answer is that by and large, we do not know what the individual exposures to outdoor light are in those studies. What Dr. Mott is referring to are studies where people will take maps of artificial light at night on Earth, mostly from satellite sources like the one in my background here. They zoom in on an area. They measure the amount of light that's indicated in satellite measurements, and that's light that goes essentially straight up out of the atmosphere and is sensed from space. And they compare that to epidemiology data for the occurrence of certain kinds of diseases in that same geographic area. And he's absolutely correct. What they find is a pretty strong correlation. The reason that I think that's still a problem is that we do not know what the nature of that connection is. And they try to account for other influences that might skew that result one way or another, lifestyle aspects, et cetera. People looked at, exposure to other kinds of environmental pollutants, if they're considering the occurrence of cancer, for example. But we're missing an important piece in the middle, and that's the quantity of light that those people are receiving. There are some indoor studies where they did measure exposures, but right now, I just don't think that we have strong evidence that directly links a particular outdoor light exposure in those correlation studies to the incidences of those kinds of diseases. I think that is going to change. And the reason is that research groups are developing what they refer to as wearable sensors. So if you can imagine something that's small enough that you could clip it onto your shirt collar, for example, that measures the actual exposure of light that a person gets, that would make a much stronger and I think more convincing case than the correlation, where people who live in areas where there's more satellite sensed light at night seem to have these higher propensity to develop these different kinds of diseases. But if we can match that up to their exposures, I think we'll clear that up. And we're just now in the period of time when these sensors are small enough that you could conceivably put them, like directly attach them essentially to the people that are parts of these studies. I think we're going to get there. I just don't want to oversell something and be perceived as possibly alarmist. if we can't strongly justify a conclusion. And so that's why I put that caveat into the report. I hope that changes in coming years.
John, thank you. Mario, thank you. This is a big conversation that we must continue and soon and urgently, but not right at this moment. So let's continue it offline. Another question from Lyra Radetsky.
No, I just wanted to comment that this is a clinical trial of a circadian light meter that was developed by Eric Page at Blue Iris Labs. And I'm wearing this trial. It works with my watch. It works with my phone to look at my light exposure 24 hours a day and my sleep data from my watch. So John's right. We are trying to look at those examples. This trial actually has two parts. One is an intervention, which I'm not doing, and one is just an observation, which I am. So it just looks at my light over 30 plus days. And so I do think we're going to see more of these wearables. I totally agree with John. I think what's critical in these wearables is actually that they are accurate. So this particular wearable also measures spectrum as well as radiance and illumination. So that's important too, because we know that the color of light makes a difference, not just the intensity.
Thanks, Lyra.
Where do we order one?
This one, it'll get better, but that's the whole point of the clinical trials, to make it better and smaller.
Is it distinguishing between indoor light and outdoor light?
It's distinguishing the spectrum and the intensity. So yes, it can look at those differences in irradiance to determine what's indoor and outdoor.
But it doesn't know offhand.
It does not know offhand. No.
Yes,
It
please.
knows what time it is.
And I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, but Brad, yes, thank you. Brad, please.
And I thank Dave Johnson for bringing today's meeting to my attention. Anyway, and again, I'm one of the ones from outside the community. Thank you for the nice, I'm sorry, and thank you for the nice presentation from Arizona. Two comments, if I may. One, for quite a while, several years ago, there was a significant attention given to even cell phones giving the invisible light. Some people, there were reports in Nature, as long as we're talking about top-level periodicals, and I speak like from the lens of an evolutionary biologist, etc., that gentlemen should not have a cell phone in their pocket. It could lead towards sterilization, disruption of sperm production, etc. It kind of went to the margins for some reason. There were additional concerns for something as simple as the phone near your ear too much, for things like brain cancer. I say this because it's very easy for us, while we're discussing visible light pollution, and I do recognize the invisible spectrum produced on the vagus strip, whether it's gamma, beta, alpha, ultraviolet, infrared, we don't care. We understand that much of that in those was invisible, like my phone. But instead, we have bathed the planet in invisible light. I am convinced that's going to be a problem. I'm not comfortable with the invisible spectrum we are bathing in momentarily. I wasn't raised in it, but the young people are. The second comment. My frustration with practicing science as a science lover is the incessant need to only make value based on the impact on humans. I was pleased to see the earlier slide about how it impacts nature, and yet we quickly return to the human impact, whether it was our immune system, the nurses, or whatever. I speak also as a naturalist. I am not someone who follows any of these causes out of any human interest whatsoever. And I'm a human. I have a child who's a human. I am here for nature. My understanding is we have been evolving for billions of years. I know when mammalian species showed up. I do not know, and I haven't heard, the role of visible or invisible light on microorganisms in the ocean, microorganisms in the forest. I know what's going on with coral. I know what's going on with all sorts of things. It doesn't just have to be carbon dioxide. It doesn't just have to be acid in the oceans. We don't know. Humans need Earth, not the other way around. And so I speak in terms of the frustration of the need to appeal to Congress and people on the human impact. These animals have evolved for millions of years. My dog has a third eyelid. I don't. He evolved and needed that. Their eyes, ears, bats, sensory organisms depend on dark. If you want to sell it that we need it because we need the nature, great. For the nobility of nature itself, I say that this is the reason to support dark skies.
Everybody from Conservation Commission's got that? John, do you want to say a word of response? We're running a little bit late, so if you could keep it brief, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, just very brief. To that exact point, essentially all the life on Earth, unless you're a bacterium in an ocean trench, evolved in a world where the only cycle of light essentially was the rising and setting of the sun. The circadian rhythm is so deeply baked into almost all life, plant, animal, and other, that I think we really don't appreciate fully how disruptive artificial light at night is, because it has arrived so recently on the scene that most species have had no chance whatsoever to adapt to it.
Yes.
John Barentine, thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks for having me today.